I would rather have a band of rogue pirates out there patrolling the streets than people who worship my SOP model or manual. And I think we see that sometimes with frameworks too. We treat them. The words red tape.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, joined today by my guest, Dr. Casey LaFrance. Did I pronounce that right?
Absolutely.
All right. So, Casey, you've got quite the background, and you're obviously accomplished as a PhD. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell them about you?
Sure. So my name's Casey. I grew up in Appalachia. I've been the graduate program director and a professor at Western Illinois for the past 17 years. I've worked in workforce development with dislocated and disabled migrants before. I've done a lot of neurodiversity work, a lot of change management, and I specialize in local government. And most of my academic writing has been on discretion and decision making and change management in police organizations. And as a result of that, I became a pretty prominent scholar on the American County Sheriff, not because my work was great, but because it was a very understudied area. So that attracted some attention from media when the constitutional sheriff movement was really at its height around 2018, stuff like that. I work at Western Illinois University primarily when I'm off contract, like I am now. I work for PM Training School teaching sustainable project management for the GPMB. DIT Rats out of Mexico doing agile transformation. And then I'm on the board of directors for the Neurodiversity Foundation. It's called the Wisdom Council. And I'm the strategic advisor for the Veteran to Project Management Mentor Alliance. So I've got some good blend of practice and theory, and that's really what I like about the area that I study, public administration, nonprofit management.
So you've really kind of not done a whole lot with your career.
So some people call it zigzagging, and it's really common with neurodivergent folks to kind of weave in and out. I don't know if it's zigzagging for me as much as just having really great opportunities and really amazing questions just appear in front of my face and having the ability to look at them.
Now, you've brought up neurodivergent a couple of times since we've just started talking, and I have a standing rule that if I don't know what something is or if there's an acronym, you got to explain it.
Sure,
So
no
can
worries.
you?
So when we talk about neurodivergence, what we're doing is creating a foil against what we would call a neurotypical brain activity. So a neurotypical person is someone whose brain chemistry and wiring are such that they don't experience the effects of conditions like ADHD, autism, PTSD, yada, yada, yada. So neurodivergent people do experience those things, and it affects the way that we um, interact with our environment, the way that we sense things, and it comes with some significant strengths and it comes with some challenges. And if you want to learn more, the Neurodiversity Foundation is always looking for volunteers.
Yeah, I actually was listening to another show where someone was talking about that, and they were saying, being neurodivergent is a superpower. It's a feature, not a bug in some ways.
Yeah, I think if you go back to evolution and you're looking at, say, the person in the tribe or the clan group or whatever who could discern which red berry would nourish you from the red berry that would kill you, that was probably a neurodivergent person. We are known for being very invested in pattern thinking and seeing patterns and being hyper focused, and sometimes that comes at the expense of knowing where the hell I'm at. Sometimes I just have to zoom out
Yeah.
and get out of hyper focus. But yeah, that's one area that I'm really proud of. My wife's autistic. I have PTSD and ADHD, and I've primarily focused all that energy into sensory room creation and sustainability in creating those. So the idea is a lot of people want regulation spaces, and they're necessary. High stress environments. You can imagine a college campus with exam stress and things like that. The other part or the other area where I could see them being really applicable is healthcare, especially emergency departments where people are going through significant trauma or crisis. But the idea behind a regulation area is you have some soft lighting, you have some comfortable furniture, you have some fidgets. Neurodivergent people like to fidget with things. We like to have things at the ready to play with to distract us, right? Um, we have a library there of books that were donated from the Autistic Self Advocacy Network, and all of this came from grants. Every bit of it came from grants that I wrote to, and my team wrote to get this money in really small chunks. 500 here, 1,000 here, 3,000 there, but it really built up, and we were so successful. And we had lean principles integrated into this whole thing. We were running iterative development, and we were able to pull it off on two college campuses for $781. And that's significant because if you called a design consultant who did this for a living professionally, they would quote you probably between $15,000 and $30,000. Right?
Now that kind of leads me into your expertise because you've gone through a lot of things that you've done, but you kind of left off a few things there too. Like you've got your PMP, which we all know what that is, but it's not an easy thing to get in the grand scheme of things. You're an agile practitioner and coach, and you're, as you put it to me privately, you're the world's leading scholarly authority on sheriffs.
I am. And then again, that's not because of how wonderful my work was. In fact, my work was very raw and exploratory because not much work had been written on sheriffs. So I started out with interviews that eventually led to surveys and built up the research agenda that way. But uh, yeah, I come from a law enforcement family. My dad retired from the Georgia State Patrol, and I have two brothers that are still in service in Metro Atlanta. So yeah, that's been a part of it. I've done a lot of studying. I've done some certifications, and the idea behind that is I like to crosswalk them. Right. I don't think we need to think in silos. I don't think we need to have one framework or one guide that we consider to be the Bible and invalid. Right. I think we can take good ideas from a lot of different places and make something that is contextually tailored to get the job done. And I'm seeing some applications you would never expect, right? I'm writing things about Lean Six Sigma and neurodiversity, right? And if we have open enough, honestly, we're improving processes, and that goes into value delivery, and that's really where in the public and nonprofit sector we have a challenge because, and this has been. It's tied to the notion of accountability, and we tend to think of that as being, hey, it's there or it's not, right? It's dichotomous. And I think that's a false way to look at it because by default, if I'm managing someone's expectations, it's going to come at the expense of someone else's, right? There's finite resources, and attention's one of those. And so I think what we see with that accountability is it can force us to think in public administration about what is politics versus what is administration. And I think sometimes we try to firewall those things off instead of realizing that they all operate in systems that reciprocally influence one another. And taking ideas from a lot of different places and tailoring them to the problem at hand, I think is the future, right?
Well, one of my first guests on this show was Sheriff Pat Melton, who investigated and broke the whole Pappygate story.
That's fantastic.
So I mean, law enforcement. There's a lot of parallels in law enforcement and project management. And what do you see as you're studying the
Well, I would take
leadership
it. I
and
would take it
what?
even farther back, right? If you look at the establishment of police departments, especially, they were all modeled on Robert Peel's London Police Metropolitan Police Department, which was in turn modeled on the British military. So what we're seeing is that not just that you can come from the military and transition into law enforcement, or come from law enforcement and transition into project management, but the work of the VPMMA is getting folks to realize that those skills, and they are very similar in law enforcement and in the military, command and control, bureaucratic structure, that sort of thing. Those skills are transferable to project management, and we're finding that veterans who approach project management with the language that they use in the military and then having it sort of translated into project management speech, right? So we don't do an after action review, we do a retrospective. right? Little subtle things like that show them the connections more immediately, give them encouragement, which leads to efficacy, and they stick it out.
Well, let's back up for a minute. And you mentioned VPMMA.
Yeah.
Can
So that's
you
the Veteran to Project Manager Mentor Alliance. It's a nonprofit organization. It's nationwide. It's based in Arizona. And Linda Pontius is our executive director. I serve as strategic advisor. And what we've done here is we've looked at ways to network and collaborate with education providers and other resource providers for veterans. And Linda has I can't begin to tell you how much she's done, but most recently, she got us full access for every participant to the Google Professional Certification Suite on Coursera. So, project management, business intelligence, UX, UI, all that stuff is available to our program participants. And we don't just include veterans, we include military spouses and family as well, right? So we've had some awesome success with little things like that. And it's just these small wins, right? Like the John Cotter stuff. You build off of these small wins. And I'm excited. We're running, we're working programmatically on applying a model that's based in basic training for the Navy to project management. So we're breaking down into an 8-week boot camp for new folks, and a 4-week boot camp for those that have a little bit more experience. And it's structured just like boot camp was for them. So it's really familiar. And that familiarity gives them a little bit of comfort, and they're willing to open their minds a little bit, right? And that happens for all of us when we start to feel a little more comfortable and we start to feel like we can relate. And really, what that's called, if to give proper attribution, Al Shalloway talks about the pickup sticks model of coaching, and where the idea is you meet people where they're at and then help them to guide themselves to understanding, right? Through uh, his method is kata coaching, but there are a lot of other ways you can do it. But taking these people and saying, "Hey, you already have the experience," and I think we were talking before the show, there are so many career fields that translate very well into project management, right? I had a person who was a barber reach out and say, "Hey, I want to do the PMP. Do you think I know what I'm doing?" And I said, "Well, let's look at what you're doing in the context of being a barber. Right? You have to procure, you have to all this other stuff." So, yeah,
Unless you want to go into construction, then it's its own animal.
that's fair. That's fair.
That's the running. I say that's the running joke in project management is you can you're either doing everything
Or
or
construction.
construction. You do not cross over.
That's fair.
That's
Now,
just
I would challenge that just a little bit. And I know you're being facetious, but it introduces an opportunity to talk about a big development. And this has just been something that was announced on Friday, and you've probably seen the Project Management Institute and Green Project Management are now issuing a professional certification that is jointly endorsed by both organizations. And so it's becoming a PMI certification, just like the ACP or the PMOCP. And the other part of that is it's it's not just a decision that was made in a vacuum, right? It communicates a lot about sustainability, the future trajectory, and so when it comes to even to construction management, I think green project management is helpful because it augments our understanding of things like risk, right? One of the activities I teach the course as an ATP, and one of the activities we talk about decisions you would make for an ice cream factory that would be inclusive of the local spotted owl population that is endangered, right? And so things like not turning the equipment on and off, having it on for a set amount of hours every day, not doing deliveries during the daytime because it disturbs the owls. So you do your deliveries at night when they're awake. Little stuff like that can be integrated to create more of a sustainability focus in almost any project area.
yeah. I'll bring up a one that anyone who was stationed at Fort Bragg would understand, and that's the red cockaded woodpecker. Because we always got the brief about that whenever we went to the range. And for those that don't know, it's a bird outside of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And when you go to the range, you have to make your safety brief and everything. And that's an endangered species that's local to the Fort Bragg Fayetteville area. So we heard about it nonstop because we had to be
No
aware of
question.
it. Yeah. So I mean,
Oh yeah,
sus-
and it's
sustainability is a real thing, even if you don't want to.
it is, and we think about it a lot of times, and this is based on a lot of stuff that I've heard from Joel Carboni and other folks from GPM. But the idea is sustainability is something we think about as an afterthought, something as a patch on we have to do for compliance. And we usually think of it as a reactive kind of thing. And in doing that, we miss the opportunity to understand the value we can add to a project. And my work in sustainability with neurodiversity and sensory support is a good example of that. So if I bought medical grade equipment with my grant money, I would spend $300 on, say, an autistic sensory swing. If I buy the same item that's made of the same material by the same company and isn't labeled autistic sensory swing, it's $30, right? If I
It's
re
just like if you 3D print something versus buying it.
Exactly, and the reason that exists has a lot to do with the insurance industry and billing, and right, and that's a whole different episode. But the idea is you can think beyond the confines of what you're told you have to have, right? And you can reuse things. There are people in India who are creating sensory support items out of bags of coffee beans and bags of pinto beans or whatever kind
Yeah.
of beans they have, right? If there's a will, there's a way, and that's where I think when you think about adding value through sustainability, it's not just repurposing, recycling, reusing, reducing. It's thinking in terms of being innovative. And Jugaad innovation in India is really, I think, what I see as the future in a lot of ways. We're having to, we find ourselves in this Gulliver position where we're often in organizations too big to deal with context and also too small to come up with common collective action that goes across a network. And so I think having these people in key points, sustainability project managers and agents, is going to be a way to help serve as a linchpin and a communication infrastructure between different project environments. And we're going to see that with more and more and more multi sector, multi corporation, and hybrid projects.
And to your point about the kind of repurposing and reusing things, lacrosse balls now are a standard in treatment of muscles, recovery, that kind of thing. Dr. Kelly Starrett was the first one to talk about it, of bringing using a lacrosse ball. And if you listen to his early discussions about it, he said, "Yeah, I tried using a tennis ball; it was too soft. I tried using a baseball; it was too hard." And someone brought in a lacrosse ball, and I looked at it and I tried it out, and I was like, "Oh, this is perfect."
No, yeah,
And it's a
it's interesting.
$3 solution to how big of how big is recovery in the gym a problem?
Yeah, I mean it's a whole lot cheaper than a big foam roller, right? And it gets the job done in ways that a foam roller can't, right?
And
Um,
it's portable.
Absolutely, and I think it's not just about affordability; it's about accessibility. And so when we have this stuff in there and it's not marked, "Hey, this is specifically this kind of swing," and if you sit in it, that's your label, right? I think that makes it a little less stigmatized and creates opportunities for people to come and check it out. And it might not be that they care about neurodiversity, but they might care about federal regulation, or they might care about the ADA, or they might care about medicine. So we get students from all walks of campus to come and learn. We do demos with them. We have intern staffing. And as a result of this project, we have had some amazing success in getting internships for our students at Western. So we have interns with Autism Amazing out of North Carolina. We have interns with the Neurodiversity Foundation, Big Brothers Big Sisters. There's so many, and we're hoping to establish more for the VPMMA. Yeah, it's really cool because these kids get college credit. A lot of times they don't get paid, but they get college credit, and along with that, they get resume experience. It's a 2 for 1, and usually they leave with a letter of recommendation, a reference they can use as they continue to plot their career trajectory. So yeah,
And
been a fantastic engine for a lot of different programs.
that's also one of the things that is the hot button topic now of networking. We just recently, a friend of mine from college made a post about his first networking group was when we were in the fraternity. And I think back to that and I'm like, I've had guests on that I met 20 something years ago that were in my fraternity.
What were you,
I,
Trevor?
I was a Zeta Beta Tau,
I'm a Pike. Don't laugh.
but no, but I mean, but the idea though is that that community is a community, and we kind of we don't discuss that enough. That I don't believe the whole statement of your network is your net worth, but I believe, as we were talking about previously off camera, that you should surround yourself with the people that you want around, that want to be around you, not just the
And
people
here's the
that.
thing that's crazy about that. There's a bunch of research. Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler back in like the 2010s. They had a huge run of media and press on their networking theory, and the reason that they did is because they argued it's not the people with whom you interact directly always. In fact, you can be influenced by people you haven't even met, who are influencing the people that are influencing the people that are interacting with you. And there was some criticism of the research because they were making some pretty bold claims like obesity and smoking and all this stuff spread in social networks. And the one thing that they didn't account for thoroughly, at least in my opinion, is self selection, right? If I'm a bigger person, I'm going to hang out with bigger people, right? Uh, that kind of thing. And so it's amazing to see what we know about it and don't know about it. But if you want to know the future of networked governance, you can go back to uh, Whole House and Jane Addams, right? You can go back to the foundation of modern recovery programs like AA, right? No central authority, nobody's in charge, a diffuse network of semi autonomous operating bodies who are making their own contextually driven decisions. That's the future of project management, right? Having top down, this is the one best way, this is the best practice. I think that only sets us up for failure, right? When we have expectations that are that lofty, they become a graveyard.
Well, when you take it to project management, it's everyone wants to create the new hot thing, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. They're called best practices for a reason, but they're not called all the times for a reason. And how many times do you, as an agile coach, especially, walk into a place, you talk to the PMs and say, "Okay, are you running waterfall or agile?" "Oh, well, it's my own blend that I've developed." And you look at them and you just wait for them to finish pontificating, and then you
And
start,
waterfall with stand ups.
and then you actually ask them the tough questions about what it is that their magical theory that hasn't caught on to the rest of the world, and you realize they're really just doing five best practices blended together into one, and they're not doing anything right because they're trying to make their own thing rather than actually
No,
doing what works.
and that's not, you don't even have to study project management explicitly to realize that. That's Ellie Goldratt, right? Uh, if you if you limit your batch size, their quality is usually going to improve, right? And that's hard to say, right? Again, I'm neurodivergent, so this is me being a hypocrite because I have six things going on at any one time. But
Only six.
generally, well, the more that I try to focus, and the more I'm able to focus, the better the quality of work I produce is, right? And I think that's true for us all. But yeah, what I see is people go back to guides and they want to find the answer in the guide. And this parallels my work on discretion. Most of my work has been about the use of discretion vis-a-vis the standard operating procedure model, right? So we have SOPs and they're supposed to govern behavior and they're supposed to be inclusive and comprehensive, but we all know that they're not, right? No SOP is going to account for every permutation of a situation that you can encounter. And that's just how it is. um, if we want people who are experts, and we do because we want to certify people, if we believe in certification, then what we ought to believe is that discretion comes along with that, a specialized form of expertise that you have as a result of your training and practice. And having a little more leeway for that, I think, is always good from in my perspective. I know some of the arguments against it, right? And it's usually they're usually straw person arguments against discretion, but um, it's not that the bureaucracy is going to run amok or run afoul. In fact, I had a county sheriff tell me one time, I would rather have a band of rogue pirates out there patrolling the streets than people who worship my SOP model or manual. And I think we see that sometimes with frameworks too. We treat them, the word's red tape, right? The origin of that term is the color of the twine that binds documents in the papal library at the Vatican, right? So when we talk about red tape, we're talking about religious devotion, reverence for a document. And I think we see that with SOPs, we see that with frameworks.
We see
Uh,
that with Agile.
well, I, I think there's being agile and doing agile, right?
Well,
And
there are Agile fanatics out there. Let's not kid ourselves.
well, there's fanatics all around, right? And I think where that comes from isn't a place of wanting to cause division or wanting to say that my method or my approach is better or worse. It's finding comfort and familiarity. And unfortunately, what happens with that is sometimes we can engage in escalation of commitment. We can start to look backward instead of forward at how we've done things before. And that's especially true in government, which historically has operated incrementally, right? We blow out all of our budget on June 30th because the fiscal year starts the next day, and we want what we got last year plus an incremental increase. Um, but that's not working, right? That's not working anymore. Not because just because it's unsustainable financially, but it's also not delivering value. It's actually creating more and more dependencies and creating more of a sunk cost, right?
Well, you touched on something there that I want to back up to. We were talking a lot about, or you were talking a lot about how you have to open your mind and think and plan for contingencies, all that stuff. And it brought me to thinking something relevant to the audience of the PMP, because the PMP is not an exam you study for, as in it's regurgitation of information. It's same with the ACP, same with becoming a scrum master. It's a mindset and a thought process rather than regurgitation of information. And that's what makes it so hard, is you have to get into that framework and mindset rather than just memorization.
And I think, well, a lot of times we're conditioned to look for the right answer, right? In the same way that we're conditioned to treat accountability as a dichotomous phenomenon. And when we expand our view of the right answer, I tell my students that the right answer in public and nonprofit settings is almost always it depends, right? And that's true. It's I can't give you best practices Positive Corp handbook from 1937 and tell you that's how the world works. And I don't think it ever worked that way, to be honest with you. But especially now, we're seeing more fluidity in structures. We're seeing a whole lot of strange bedfellows emerge, people who create temporary alliances to defeat an enemy or to carry out a project and then they dissolve. So there's fluid participants, wicked problems. We're seeing problems we never even thought to imagine, and our instinct is, as humans, right, from system one thinking, is to try to apply a ready-made solution. It's the same reason we kick the TV when it doesn't work or whatever. I don't
I
really
usually
kick the
I usually will hit it rather than kick it.
I don't really. You can't really kick a TV these days. They're all
Well,
kind of thin and fragile, right?
yeah, we're aging ourselves with the old TVs where you walk up
That's
to it and
right.
smack it on the side. It's got some girth to it.
Oh man, I remember having to go change the dial and you got three channels, and if the president was on, you were screwed.
When I was in college, I sold electronics and I worked in in the TV department. And the worst thing I would ever hear was, "I'm going to buy a 36-inch tube TV, which is ginormous, one of the first flat screens."
Mhm.
And then you'd ask them, "Okay, well, when can we deliver that?" "Oh, I'm taking it home." "What kind of truck do you have?" "Oh, I've got a Honda Civic. We'll take it out of the box. It's fine." You know, and then it's a game of Tetris to not to get it in there and then not rip their seats, and yeah. But the whole concept of what we're talking about, it goes to, we talked about thought process and best practices, and that leads right into risk mitigation and leadership, because part of being a leader is knowing where knowing where your expertise is, and then also knowing where it isn't.
Right, and I think there that we're seeing some emergent models of risk with AI, especially that have promise for regulating the use of digital twins and things like that. So there's all kinds of like techie kind of regs that are coming there, but there's a there's a lot more I think that goes into it. And when we think about risk, we forget a lot of times about the positive side of risk and
Yep.
opportunities, and I think we also we have methodology that we can use. It's not perfect, but we can, to a certain extent, forecast, engage in probabilistic inquiry and things like that. Um, but I think if we think about externalities and what is going to be a spillover effect and how that's going to affect, right? And I don't want to go too crazy into this and start talking about butterflies flapping their wings in Japan and that kind of stuff, but systems theory, right? If we recognize that everything we do is not done in isolation, it is going to have externalities. It's going to have unintended consequences that we can't even imagine, right?
Yeah, you start breaking into the unknown unknowns.
And that's where a lot of people would say, all right, this is where Ken Fin works. This is where you go in and you find out which square you're in, and maybe there's some truth to that, but I think inherent simplicity is also a good approach, right? Going back to the basics, like what is always going to be true, right? You're always going to have certain things in your value stream, for instance, that could be sources of problem, right? Handoffs, waiting, things like that. No matter the organization, no matter its culture or its history, and because of that, I really like the Amplio University generic value stream because it allows us to go in with a template and then we can adjust it and tailor it. But we don't have to start with a blank sheet and try to teach A3 thinking to people that just don't have it yet.
Yeah, I got reminded of this by friend of mine a couple months ago about the Eisenhower matrix and just how simple that is to use. And I've incorporated that into so many things because it's a clear delineation of four squares, priority. You pick your X and Y axis of what you fill in, but you can prioritize what's important and what's not
Sure. And what's
by
funny
being
about that
brutally honest with
matrix,
it.
we have in public administration, Richard Matlin came up with what he called the ambiguity conflict matrix in response to the Eisenhower. And the idea behind it is we're not talking top down or bottom up. We're talking about the degree of ambiguity. That is, do we know what's going to happen if we do this? And the degree of conflict, right? Are we, and this is usually partisan, right? In terms of public administration, is this something that is causing political polarization between parties or not? And up until recently, we had some examples of things that the easiest area of implementation, administrative implementation. So there's not much conflict, and we have a great idea of what's going to happen. And for the longest time, vaccination was a good example of that. Right? We had consensus on smallpox vaccination, and um, we didn't consider it to be politically contentious, and we knew what the effects of being inoculated were going to be. And we're moving away from that. We don't have that same sense of certainty with a lot of policy areas. There are very few that fit that bill because politics has pervaded almost everything. And I say that as a political scientist, right? Um, and I think a lot of that is going back to dichotomous thinking. You have to be one team or another. You have to have this opinion or this opinion. And in every other field of science, when we look at human tendencies, whether or characteristics, whether we're talking about height or weight or intelligence or whatever, those characteristics are normally distributed. And we would expect the same from political opinions. And I say that because most people are going to fall within one standard deviation of the mean. And that means we can't be that polarized and hate each other as much, right? But if we think in terms of this is what I am and that's what this other person is, whether it's frameworks or race or whatever, we're doing a disservice to ourselves because uh, I don't learn from people that think like me and know the things that I know.
Well, you think about Pareto's principle. You know, we the if you look at your average bell-shaped curve, you're spending more time on the tails than you are on the bell because you're dealing with the outliers rather than the mean, which is the standard.
Right, and that's another adaptive principle that goes back to inherent simplicity, right? We're not just talking about theory of constraints; we're talking about Pareto. Right? Most organizations, if you make some subtle adjustments, are going to have significant value added. You just have to
Yep.
know what those are, right? And
And that
again, we're back to value streams, but yeah, it's a wild world right now in terms of learning, right? Because what I'm seeing is less of a need to learn and memorize, and much more of a need to unlearn and being willing to challenge yourself in the way that you have structured your representations of the world. And the way I like to think about it is, and this sounds maybe a little squishy. Um, they might take my PhD back. I don't know, but but I kind of think about it as what you're what you're trying to accomplish in serving the public interest, right? If you're dealing with nonprofits or public agencies, you're never going to be able to come up with a definition that everyone agrees on.
Well,
You're never
when you start talking about dealing with the public, now the public is a relatively obtuse term, but you could change that to your audience, and your audience is going back to that bell-shaped curve. You're going to have mass
right, and
adoption, and then you're going to have mass hatred and fanatics on either side of the
exactly.
tail.
And the distinction you're making is actually the one that I was making. The point that I'm making here is that when we're talking about value delivery in the private sector, it's often in the context of people who have chosen to buy stock in our organization, right? Citizens don't get that choice, right? The 16th Amendment says you have to cough up some of your income to the federal government. And most states have, and some locals have their own taxes, and everybody has sales tax, we know.
Well, at least in the US,
Right, right.
we have international listeners who go under
Well,
different rules.
those international listeners, I'm a little bit jealous of them because when they go to the store and they look at the price of a product, they know exactly what they're going to pay for it, right? Because it doesn't get taxes added at the register. Right? There's a little more transparency there. But but yeah, I think having a little bit of an open mind about your own ideas, your own experience, and what it really comes down to is we tend to think and are enculturated to think, at least in America, or especially in America, we're kind of thought to think in terms of heroes and villains, right? Again, dichotomous thinking. We're taught that you're either a wild success or a miserable failure, and there's no room for in between. And life takes place in that gray area, right?
Well, when you bring that up, it always reminds me of, well, this person was an overnight success. They exploded overnight. But I always say it took them 20, that one night before was 20 years. You know, you didn't hear about somebody until you did. And social media is living proof of that because it's called your 15 minutes of fame for a reason. It's not called your 5 years of fame.
That's right, man. It's called Heinz 57, not Heinz one. It's absolutely true, and I think that's the idea I'm getting at is even when we're dealing with a compulsory situation, we can still deliver value to stakeholders and do it early and iteratively. And the trick is we don't do it to them; we do it with them, right? And I learned that uh, again. I've just had some crazy, incredible experiences that have really shaped the way that I approach work. And one of those was I was an intern for the Appalachian Regional Commission, and I worked with my mentor, a lady named Alice Sampson, and Helen Lewis, who is considered the grandmother of Appalachian studies. Her whole work, her whole corpus was on how to empower miners in places like Kentucky and also in Wales. Her
Hey,
work,
you better be careful there. I live in Kentucky.
well, you would like her work. So
Okay.
she was out of Berea for a while. She did a lot of work with coal miners, helping them to organize, helping them to advocate for things like labor rights and working conditions. And she worked with John Gaventa, who now runs the IDES in London. She worked with him in Wales, applying and comparing the experiences. But the idea is if you want people to buy into your idea, you have to give them an idea, an opportunity to shape it. If you're going to say, "Hey, we were going to introduce a change," the people who are going to be affected by that change ought to have some say in what it looks like. Right? And a lot of times, it's not that they have expertise in a particular domain; it's that they feel empowered and the way it works usually is if you feel invited and you feel welcome, then there's a little bit more of an onus on yourself to learn and be involved, right?
I
So,
think I was going to say, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap this portion of the episode up because I want to make sure I've got time for my personalized question for you.
man,
You know, I
I'm ready.
I have every episode I create personalized questions for the guest.
Well, I grew up with a Southern mama, so you're not going to embarrass me.
So, you gotta, as the audience has seen, Casey is a very intelligent person.
He's
So
also
now,
scatterbrained.
so is a hot dog a sandwich? And I need you to answer with the same level of intellectual rigor you would use to defend your dissertation.
All
Go.
right. So, where I would start with this is a language definition, borrowing from Tom Gilden, right? So, a language definition of hot dog, so that we all operationally agree on what that is. No, I'm just bullshitting.
Baseline.
I I think anything's a sandwich if you call it a sandwich, right? We only call it a sandwich because some dude was playing cards and wanted to be able to eat while he played cards. So, and that's the thing, we get hung up on some questions sometimes that, yeah, I don't know. Now that depends. If it's a Chicago dog, I think that would be its own entity though, and there would be no ketchup near it.
Are you one of those people?
Well, I grew up in North Georgia, but I always had an affinity for Chicago because we had WGN, so I could watch Bozo and the Cubs, and I was
Well,
really mad at them.
I meant the ketchup on the hot dog.
Oh well, that's a Chicago thing. Yeah, you can't do it or you get kicked out of Chicago.
Then I guess I'm never moving to Chicago.
Yeah, it's a little expensive to live there anyway, but yeah, the ketchup on the hot dog was something I learned the hard way. I asked for it and they mean mugged me, so yeah, went in
Hey, if you're
raw.
in Chicago, you're lucky you didn't get shot.
That's true. Oh, well, it's a it's an interesting place, and it has a lot of history. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. But yeah, it's we usually go to cat cafes and stuff like that when we're in Chicago, or we get divvy bikes and ride on Lakeshore Drive. But um, I've been doing some advocacy work in with folks in different areas around the suburbs, and I know that area fairly well because I did my PhD at Northern in DeKalb, so it was like 60 miles west of Chicago.
So your official answer is a hot dog is a sandwich?
I don't know, man. Like the whole time I've been talking about dichotomies, I think the question uh, should be something different, right? To what extent is a hot dog a sandwich? Let's put a scale on it. I'd say an 85. Right.
Well, if you put it between two slices of bread, is it a sandwich versus a hot dog bun?
If you're fulfilling requirements.
Well, but you're assuming risk if you put ketchup on a hot dog in Chicago, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But if you're, going to taking this dissection even further, my son, my 7-year-old son, he can put ketchup on a hot dog just about anywhere in the country or even the world, and they're probably not going to judge him. But if I do it, it's a different set of rules.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's interesting how that works. My baby can scream at the Walmart and she doesn't get yelled at. Well, when I
You
start
can
yelling at
scream
the
at
Walmart, they call the police.
No, depending on which Walmart, they might actually just say that sounds normal that the crazy person over there is screaming. With with that riveting hot dog talk, I think now is a great time where you have the floor. What do you want to promote? Tell the audience about, get them to follow and listen and do all that stuff for you.
Okay, so there's a few things that are really emerging. The first thing is Project Management Life. It's an organization, it's a nonprofit organization based in Michigan, and they have a LinkedIn page. They're doing a whole lot of community building for the project management community. And it's not stuff about, say, preparing for exams and things like that. It's more about how to live your best life, how to incorporate things like wellness, time management, balance, self care. So check them out. The VPMMA, the Veteran Project Management Mentor Alliance, is always looking for people to serve as mentors and participants in our programming. We're on LinkedIn. Neurodiversity Foundation, same thing. Always looking for people that are interested in learning more and advocating more for neurodiverse folks. And then finally, if you want to study with me, we have an online program in political science at the master's level that I run with some amazing colleagues at Western Illinois University. And get your application in. You can come and work with me
They can
from
come learn from you.
anywhere.
They can come
Absolutely.
learn from you, and they can continue the hot dog conversation.
They can, and they can do it at their internship while they gain practical hands-on experience and academic credit.
There you go. So with all that, I think we can start to wrap this episode up, and like and subscribe, follow. The show goes on because of the audience and the support that I get from the audience as well as my guests. And I just want it to be known that I do appreciate and I do respond to as much as I can and try and add value to everybody's life, because I've said it before, if you want to learn how to pass the PMP or certifications, this is not the show for you. This is the show where I bring on real experts who've lived their lives and we talk about real world applications to project management. So, like, subscribe, follow, leave comments, interact with me, all that fun stuff. For may all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Dr. Casey LaFrance, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the disgruntled PM.